Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining is one of the most iconic horror movies of all time. It has probably some of the most iconic scenes of any horror movie that have seeped into pop culture purely through osmosis, with many people that haven't even seen the movie getting references to certain scenes.
Here's Johnny!
Come and play with us, Daddy. Forever and ever and ever.
It's earned its status on all-time best movie lists. It has amazing acting all around, revolutionary cinematography, wonderfully disgusting practical effects, and, for some reason, Stephen King hates it. So much that he worked on a remake of it that was more faithful to the book. Now, it's not exactly unusual for King's movie adaptations to not go so well. In fact, it's pretty much the norm. His most successful movie adaptations are actually of stories that most people don't realize were written by him. Stand By Me, The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, Hearts in Atlantis. Well, I liked it. None of them the horror stories he's most known for. This is because most of his stories are introspective, filled with internal monologues and complex thoughts that don't translate well to the screen. This is especially true with The Shining. At the point where they all get to the hotel, it's about a third of the way through the book. Most of the dialogue that's in the book is in the movie. That should tell you how much thinking and internal monologuing is going on. There's also a few flashbacks, but I'll get to that later. Imagine trying to take 100 pages of abstract imagery and put it into a way that's visible. Kubrick actually does a pretty good job of doing some of it. The problem is, it's so close to perfect, but it fundamentally changes a lot of the core beings of the characters. Jack is portrayed as a completely self-centered and abusive drunk, and Wendy seems like a shrinking violet who doesn't know what's going on at all. And Danny comes off as an autistic kid who can only talk through his imaginary friend while moving his finger. Not at all accurate portrayals. First, Jack. Let's pause for a second here. He's a recovering alcoholic, which is pretty obvious. You'd think that's the reason he got fired, but you'd be wrong. They never go into it in the movie because Kubrick chose to ignore half the plot, a pretty important part, in favor of gushing blood and axe murders. By the way, none of those iconic scenes happened in the book, which goes to show Kubrick's talent, but it also goes to show just how much was taken away in favor of spectacle. Anyway, the reason he was fired is a long story, but he beat up a spoiled rich kid student that he had to cut from the debate team for having a stutter. At this point, he wasn't drinking because of another long story, which leads into Danny and by extension, Tony. He's an unusually smart kid, partially because of The Shining, but he's also naturally perceptive. The Shining lets him sense the thoughts of people around him, and strong thoughts, especially words he doesn't understand, like divorce or suicide, manifest as nearly physical visions. Tony appears to him as an older boy in dreams and sometimes mirrors, always too far away to see, and sends visions of important things to come. He finds a missing suitcase when they move to their new house, he sees Jax coming home from his interview, and so on. When they move to the Overlook, Tony is overpowered by the power of the hotel, and sends them warnings before disappearing entirely. In the movie, it's almost the opposite. Tony seems to be a malevolent force, only ever taking control of Danny and doing creepy child things. Wrong. Wendy is closest to her character in the book, but all of her complexity is lost. Her mother's voice is always in the background of her mind, constantly reminding her of her inadequacies as a parent. She's developed a complex about it, and is always thinking about how her mother would react to what's happening in her life. Her mother sees herself as the ultimate parent. She thinks she could raise Danny better, and that Wendy would be better out of the picture. Wendy also recognizes that Jack is Danny's favorite parent, and is afraid of Jack taking him away or turning him against her. Going back to Jack, he was raised in an abusive household with a father who was an alcoholic and beat his wife and children. This is the kind of environment that usually results in one of two outcomes for the child. Either they swear never to become like them and hate everything about them, or they turn out exactly the same and perpetuate the cycle. In Jack's case, he turned out the same until it came to the point where he was about to lose his family. If you can't tell by this point, the book is less about a haunted ghost hotel and more about three people just trying to coexist with their problems. problems that they got from their parents and that they hope they haven't passed along to their son. They both were considering a divorce, Wendy because of Jack's drinking problem and his accidentally breaking Danny's arm in a rage, and with a guilty afterthought that reminded herself of her mother so she could have Danny to herself. And Jack because he thought they'd be better off without him. He was also considering suicide. Danny could sense all of this, and while he did not fully understand it, could tell that it was very bad. The movie makes it seem like Jack got the job and is forcing them along, but they all see it as a fresh start on what was about to be the end of their marriage. Wendy's not such an apologist in the book. At all. Really. Everyone's hopeful, having fun, and Jack's actually being productive with his writing most of the time. It's basically a fun winter vacation for all of them. So, what changes all of this? In the book, Jack finds a scrapbook about the history of the hotel and all of its dark secrets. He decides to write a book about its history, and with that, the hotel gains control over him. He doesn't go crazy or revert to an abusive alcoholic, but the spirits begin to awaken. In the movie, Danny wanders past room 237, finds it open, and decides to check it out. In the book, he intentionally took the key to room 217, random change, and went in. What follows is mostly the same in the book and the movie, but in the movie, Jack takes the news that Danny was strangled with an almost casual indifference, instead of the book's reflexive parental fear, where he agrees with Wendy that they have to leave the mountain. Which is one of the main differences of the book and the movie. The movie adapts the book into a typical horror movie with a spooky skeleton rooms, while the book is something that could be a lot scarier. It's about adult fear. It's about the fact that at any moment, someone you care about can turn into a monster, the kind that's hardest to fight. That you can find yourself becoming the parents you hated. That something can be seriously wrong with your child. That once you screw up, you could be never trusted completely again. And that maybe you don't deserve that trust as much as you think you do. One of the lines that is constantly repeated in the book about the Overlook sums it up nicely. This inhuman place makes human monsters. Forget illusionary ghosts, the biggest threat is the Jack who is rapidly descending into madness. Jack in the movie destroys the radio so they can't call for help. In the book, he destroys it because voices in it are telling him to kill his family. He's resisting the influence of the hotel. It's very clear that it's not him who is losing his mind, but a shadow cast over him by the hotel. The only iconic scene that is in both the book and the movie is when he's talking to the ghost bartender and drinking ghost martinis. In the book, the first time he goes there, immediately after the strangling incident, he's clearly talking to himself with no response and drinking air. Later, he comes to the scene as it is in the movie, but is found by Wendy and Danny surrounded by decorative candle holders in the shape of unused wine bottles. The book is much more ambiguous about the supernatural events that go on. Everything that goes on is treated with an attitude of, maybe I was just hearing things, or the circuit breaker's messed up again. Meanwhile, in the movie, skeleton room. And Jack says,
My goddamn soul. Just a glass of beer. Hi, Lloyd.
and a ghost bartender happens to appear out of nowhere, and the tab's conveniently already been paid. This is literally the opposite of the book. You hadn't made a covenant with the devil to give up your civilized self, with its trappings of love and respect and honor. It just happened to you. Passively, with no say, you ceased to be a creature of the mind and became a creature of the nerve endings, from college-educated man to wailing ape in 5 seconds. Going back to what happened in room 2-whatever-7, the movie's bizarre in that Jack sees a naked woman, a possible intruder, who's not supposed to be there, who probably strangled his kid, and decides it's a good idea to cheat on his wife because why not? I get the feeling that this was only here for a nudity horror bait and switch. What happened in the book, you ask? Remember the student that he beat up and got fired for? He's sitting in the tub, dead and rotting, and says in a clear voice, "I don't stutter." Jack freaks out, seemingly more at the statement than the situation, and runs away. Throughout the book, Jack's internal narration about what happened between them and why he was cut from the debate team have been getting less and less reliable, and it seems like there was something shady going on. Meanwhile, the play that Jack was actually writing is suspiciously similar to what was going on between the two of them. Now, while the movie is great, maybe you can start to see some of the reasons why it completely fails as an adaptation, and why Stephen King hates it. It takes the attention away from the human aspect and focuses more on blood and gore. I didn't even get into some of the more nitpicky stuff or the largely different ending. It's definitely worth a read, and if you like the movie, you'll like the book even more so. I obviously like the book more than the movie, but what do you think? Is there anyone out there who read the book but still liked the movie better? Have you not read the book but still think the movie's better despite my points? Tell me what you think and let me know if I missed something. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and if you want to see more things like this, go ahead and subscribe. I'll see you around.